Once upon a time, there was a young man named Daniel, known in Q City for his good looks and wealth. He owned several successful businesses that provided him a steady income, allowing him to live comfortably. As the only child, Daniel was close to his mother, especially after losing his father at a young age. His mother, who held dear memories of her late husband, chose to stay in their village, where those memories were strongest. She loved her son deeply and often visited him in the city, bringing food and homemade meals, knowing he lived alone. In Q City, Daniel enjoyed an easygoing life, spending his evenings with his two best friends, Kelvin and Stephen. After work, the three would meet at their favorite bar, sharing drinks and stories of their day. These evenings were moments of pure joy for Daniel, filled with laughter, companionship, and the freedom to be himself without worry or judgment. Life felt carefree. They indulged in pleasures, spent generously, and never took things too seriously. This rhythm continued for many months, each side content with the arrangement. Daniel enjoying his vibrant city life, and his mother finding comfort in her visits and the knowledge that he was happy. One day, Madame Deborah came to visit Daniel and was dismayed to see him looking worn out from yet another night of drinking with his friends. Concerned, she decided to stay a bit longer to keep an eye on him and help him get back on track. As she spent more time with Daniel, a thought began to settle in her mind. Her son was no longer a boy, and he could use the stability of a family of his own. She imagined what it would be like to have grandchildren around and longed to see him settled and happy. But she hesitated, unsure of how to bring it up. One evening, Daniel came home filled with excitement. He'd made an unexpected profit in his business that day. Seeing her son so thrilled, Madame Deborah shared in his joy. Then, curious, she asked, "Why didn't you go out to celebrate with your friends?" Daniel smiled and replied, "Mama, you're here tonight. How could I stay out late?" In that moment, Mrs. Esther felt a surge of hope. If Daniel could feel this sense of responsibility and joy in her presence, perhaps he was ready for a partner who could share his life with him fully. That evening, Madame Deborah called Daniel to sit with her. "My son," she began gently. "Yes, Mama," he replied, sensing something serious in her tone. "There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you." Daniel turned to her, curiosity sparking as he tried to guess what she might say. 100 possibilities ran through his mind, yet marriage was nowhere among them. Just then, his mother broke his thoughts. "Have you thought about getting married?" Daniel froze, caught completely off guard. "Marriage? Mama, where is this coming from?" She looked at him warmly. "You're getting older, my son. You need a woman by your side, and, well, I'd love to see my grandchildren before my time comes." He chuckled nervously. "But marriage isn't the only way for me to have children, Mama." Madame Deborah's expression turned stern. "God forbid. No child of mine will be born out of wedlock." Daniel sighed, "But marriage, it's not as simple as it sounds, Mama." She softened, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It felt that way for me, too, when I met your father. But you saw the happiness we shared until he was taken from us." Daniel sighed deeply, thoughtful but conflicted. "My son, I understand your worries," Mrs. Esther said softly, "but as your mother, I also know what you need. You need a true companion. This life of late-night drinking and partying won't bring you anything lasting. Just think about it." With that, she rose and went to bed, leaving Daniel alone in the quiet of the living room. In the days that followed, tension lingered between them. Daniel avoided his mother's gaze whenever he could, uneasy with her words still echoing in his mind. A few weeks later, Madame Deborah returned to her village. Daniel felt a sense of relief and quickly slipped back into his usual routine. That very evening, he met up with his friends, and together, they headed to their favorite bar to unwind, just like old times. The bar was full of beautiful women, dancing and mingling as usual, but to Daniel's surprise, his friends didn't seem as interested as before. Puzzled, he asked them what was going on. After a bit of hesitation, they explained that things had changed in his absence. They were ready to settle down and start families of their own. When Daniel pressed them for details, they revealed something he hadn't known. One night, while he was away, they'd gone out as usual, hoping for a carefree evening. But in a frightening twist, some of the women they were with had tried to slip something into their drinks. Luckily, they noticed just in time and avoided drinking the spiked drinks. That close call had shaken them. It made them realize how risky their lifestyle had become and convinced them to leave it behind. Daniel, however, couldn't fully grasp their change in perspective. After all, he hadn't been there to see it himself. 3 months later, Calvin got married in a joyful ceremony, and that was when Daniel began to realize how serious his friends were about settling down. Not long after, Stephen also tied the knot. Suddenly, Daniel felt the pressure to follow suit, but he didn't have anyone in his life he could consider marrying. He confided in his mother, who then introduced him to Esther, a young woman from their village. Esther was beautiful, respectful, and humble. Even before meeting Daniel, she had heard about him and cared deeply, hoping to be the best wife she could be. But despite her many admirable qualities, Daniel felt resentment toward his mother for bringing him a village woman as a potential bride. Still, with his friends all married and his mother's high praise for Esther, he felt compelled to consider it. In no time, Esther and Daniel got married. And they lived under the same roof. Daniel began disrespecting Esther at any opportunity he got and yelling at her at the slightest provocation. He came home late at night and his wife has not right whatsoever to question him. Sometimes, he eats what she prepares and other times, downplay what she has cooked. In bed, he never seeks concern to be intimate with her. He always had his way with her when it's okay with him. Many nights Esther will cry herself to sleep contemplating whether to leave or still stay with him. However, Daniel didn't know Esther was his lucky charm. Each time she cried, things turned sour for him. It didn't take much time for his businesses to start collapsing. As Daniel's misfortunes seemed to pile up, he started blaming all his setbacks on Esther, treating her even worse in his frustration. When things continued to go poorly, he saw an opportunity to make money off her and regain what he believed he'd lost because of her. He began arranging meetings between Esther and his wealthy friends, collecting payments to fund his reckless lifestyle. The first was Randy, a wealthy bachelor who enjoyed paying for companionship without commitment. Daniel called Randy, hyping up Esther's beauty and allure. That evening, he dressed her seductively and drove her to Randy's home. Afterward, he pocketed the payment and took her back. Over the following weeks, Daniel arranged more such encounters, even sleeping with her himself whenever he pleased. Soon, Randy's friend, hearing about Esther, also reached out, and Daniel continued to exploit her. This cycle went on for months, until one day, Daniel arranged for Esther to visit Mr. Thompson, an influential businessman he once worked with. But when she arrived, Mr. Thompson was unexpectedly struck by a high fever, suddenly nauseous and weak. Out of her natural kindness, Esther stayed by his side, cleaning up after him, preparing a home remedy, and caring for him until his strength returned. Grateful and deeply moved by her selflessness, Mr. Thompson couldn't thank her enough for her kindness, seeing her in a new light as someone genuine and compassionate. That night, Mr. Thompson had a lengthy conversation with Esther. He seemed to be surprised by how a homely woman like Esther would be sleeping around for money. With tears in her eyes, Esther confessed everything to Mr. Thompson. He asked why she didn't run away, and Esther revealed that Daniel's parents took care of her when she lost her parents long ago in the village, and she saw this as an opportunity to pay them back for all they had done for her. Mr. Thompson shared in Esther's pain and promised to get her out of the mess. Without saying anything, Esther returned home and pretended to be sick to buy time till Mr. Thompson came to her rescue. He rented an apartment and gathered some money few days after Esther. He also spoke to a lawyer friend on their marriage annulment. Few days later, Daniel heard a knock on his door. He rushed to open the door, and to his amusement it was Mr. Thompson. Thinking he had come for another service, he yelled at Esther to get dressed and follow him. In that moment the lawyer entered the room and gave them a divorce letter to sign, else he will be arrested for what he has been doing to Esther. His heart began pounding in his chest. Without wasting much time, he signed the document, and Esther was set to walk away from his premises. But Mr. Thompson turned back, gave him some money to atone for all that his parents had spent on Esther, and warned him never to come close to Esther. And that was how Esther got her freedom. Months passed, and soon, Esther and Mr. Thompson fell deeply in love. But do you think Esther was indeed free? What will happen to their love story? Thank you for watching, and please subscribe.